Hey everybody, hope you're doing great today. This is Paul from the Juvenile Aquarium. Today's video I'm going to talk about a aquarium that I've got here. It's a 40-gallon breeder tank that I've got a bunch of Julidochromis fry in there. So it's a new tank. It was been up and running for a while, fully cycled. After a couple months of having these fry in there, feeding them, this tank suddenly turned green. It was basically like a thick green color. You couldn't see through the water. If the fry came up to the front of the glass, then you could definitely see them swimming around. But you couldn't see any of the plants in there, and you couldn't see any of the fish if they went to the back of the tank. So the way I ended up getting it fixed is through this method I'm going to show you here shortly. Basically, when you get green water in your tanks, it's usually due to an excess amount of food, excess amount of light, or just a lot of waste in there that's causing a nitrate bloom, and then the algae just loves that, gloms onto that free food, and then gets out of control from there. So it didn't do any harm to my fish, just you couldn't really see them. In this case, it was a fry tank, and so there's about 30-40 fry in there, so I did want to keep feeding them. They're small, they need to eat on a daily basis. So I didn't really adjust any feedings, and I didn't really change anything else with the aquarium. I did do one water change in between there. Stayed green for a while, but then with this addition, basically I put a plant in there, an external plant that went inside the tank, and that helped absorb some of the excess nutrients over there. And after about a month and a half, the tank's starting to clear up, as you'll see here shortly, that now you can actually see through the entire tank, even though it still has some tinge to it and still has a little bit ways to go. So let's go take a look at the tank and the plant that I used. Here's the tank. As you can see, it's still a little hazy. There's some mulm caked up there too. So as part of the adjustments I need to do to this tank, there's only 2 plants in there, which are pretty slow growing. They've got algae on them right now. And then anytime the fry move around, they kick up a lot more of the mulm in there, as you can see. It kind of floated around. This one sponge filter takes up some of the mulm, obviously not a whole lot. Plan on adding a power filter in here just for a little extra filtration, help clean this mess up. Get that filter cycled as well too, because actually I want to drop that. Eventually that's going to go into the 75-gallon here that currently has no fish. And I'll talk about that a little bit in a future video, the reason why I'm adding a power filter in there. It's a small internal power filter. So the plant I added is just a simple pothos plant. It's sticking in the water right now, starting to grow some roots in the water. I'll leave it there. And basically, it's just taking up the extra nutrients in the tank. So like I mentioned, I haven't changed anything when it comes to feeding. The quantity of fish are still the same. They're younger though, about ½ inch to an inch. So still juveniles. Before they get too big, they will be traded off to a local fish store. So light, it's not set too high. I think it's on an 8-hour cycle. Probably set to like 50 or 60% of total intensity that the light's capable of outputting. So just lack of plants. So while I put a pothos in here, that's helped. It took, like I mentioned, about a month and a half. That doesn't necessarily mean you need to put pothos in there to help get rid of your green water tank, if that's something you want to do. In this tank's case, the green water didn't harm any of the fish. They're all fine. As you can still see, they're kind of swimming around at the bottom over there. So, but there are other plants you can put in there. You can put a lot more of these anubias if you want. Ideally, I would put in some sort of plant that takes its nutrients out of the water column versus a rooted plant, because you got those excess nutrients floating around. That's what caused the green algae bloom. So you can get something like hornwort, guppy grass, even top floating plants, some of those duckweeds, frogbit, whatnot, whatever's found in your area. So the nice thing about the duckweed and the frogbit, it floats on top, so it does help block some of the light. That reduces some of the light if the light is more of an issue. You can feed less as well. In this case, since I do have a lot of fry in there, I try and feed them a good sized portion of food just so they're well fed. Only feeding once a day. They do munch on algae, and so there was more algae in the tank earlier. They kind of did a number on it. So the pothos plant did help clean the tank up. As you saw from the other video over there, it was pretty thick and you couldn't really see anything towards the back. But it's looking much better now. So another thing Rather than using an internal filter to clean up the excess mulm, I could also siphon it, pull out the handy dandy Python, siphon that excess mulm out. That's less nutrients as well too. As you can see, tank is cleaned up pretty much 100%. So that last video I showed you that where it was hazy, you could still see it. That was exactly 5 days ago. And then so now it recently, just over that past 5 days, it cleared up completely. So it was almost 2 months, and then plus maybe a week. 2 months and plus a couple of days. Finally cleaned out from going from green, took a couple of days to get fully green the way you saw it in that other video, to the point where it is now, it's clear. So anytime you get any changes in your tank, whether you've got a fish that passed away and you're not sure why, you get something like this, where the tank went from pretty much clear water to a thick green water where you couldn't see through the tank, you should check your parameters. Get your test kit, check the parameters, see what's going on. Is anything out of sync over there? If you got things that are not where they're supposed to be, your nitrates are extremely high, your ammonia's not where it's supposed to be, nitrites are another issue, then you need to do water changes. So doing enough water changes, especially with this tank here, if I did a number of water changes, it definitely would get the green out. But these being fry and Lake Tanganyikan fish, I don't like to do large water changes. They're a little more sensitive to it. So I didn't do as many water changes for this. Instead, in this case, I knew the issue was more of a lot of floating nutrients out there. I do feed these fish a little heavy because they are fried. They need to eat a lot while they're growing. So the tank is relatively new. It's been up and running prior to me putting them in there. So it's been going at least 6 months total, and about 3 months while they were in the tank. So I did check when it turned green. I was continually observing the fish. I didn't see any issues. They weren't gasping for breath. They weren't acting skittish. There was no other issues with them. So I could tell that, yeah, while it was green, it wasn't harming the fish. So it's not necessarily an emergency thing that, oh, you need to get taken care of right now. I can understand if you've got a tank on main display and it suddenly turns green, you've got people coming over, they're going to wonder, hey, what's going on? So like in this case, I mentioned it took about 2 months for it to clear up. Obviously it doesn't look great. Mine is in my fish room over here in the basement. Usually it's mainly just me coming down here to enjoy the fish. Just to recap, if you do get an algae bloom where the tank turns green like that, the ways you want to treat it is take a look at your feedings. If you're overfeeding, then you might want to cut back the feedings. Lighting, if you've got too much light running, your best bet would be to reduce the lighting, reduce the intensity of the lighting, even turn it off for a couple of days in order to help prevent the algae from getting out of hand. And the other thing is adding plants. So live plants, they do consume the nutrients that the algae relies upon. So especially in this case, I put a pothos plant. It's a partially underwater, partially above water. It does a good job at soaking up those nutrients. You can do other plants in there, as I mentioned in the video. Look for water column feeding plants. Those are going to be better for your aquarium. They'll take up more nitrates. They also help limit algae growth on your other plants. So that's all for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Please hit that like button if you did so others can find it too. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.